Tenen ta chaje chembo nyomling ngu he patela ta count hiba yendo.
In the presentation of the actual or authentic path of Mahamudra, we saw that there is first the brief and then the extensive explanation of the four symbols. From within the extensive explanation of the four symbols, this morning we went through the first in the order of the extensive presentation, which was freedom from recollection, the samadhi of lion's play, and the second in the order of the extensive presentation, which was recollection, the illusory samadhi. Now we come to the third, which is the heroic samadhi and the realization of the unborn. And this is in verse 32. Through the practice of the disciplines of recollection and freedom from recollection, in either that order, as in the brief statement, or the reverse order, as in the extensive description, one comes to realize the third symbol, which is the unborn. This is the realization that all appearances have from the very beginning been without birth or true arising. Now, this is in part in reference to what is traditionally said about Mahamudra, what is realized, which is that it is beyond the three, it is devoid of the three conditions and beyond the four joys. Without the three conditions means that Mahamudra is independent of the condition of bliss, the condition of cognitive lucidity, and the condition of non-conceptuality as meditation experiences. Whereas most meditative states are dependent upon one or more of these conditions, Mahamudra is not. Therefore, while most other meditative states are held, therefore, to be composite, Mahamudra is not composite. Therefore, Mahamudra is, from the first, unborn, subsequent to that, does not abide, and finally, is unceasing. Furthermore, not only is Mahamudra not form, for example, when you look at your mind, you don't detect form, but neither is it possessed of form. The meaning of this is that you might think, although the mind's nature itself is not form, does it possess the characteristics of form in some other way? And it does not. So, in that way, Mahamudra is shown or realized to be unborn. What exactly is the unborn nature of things? While it is the case that in absolute truth nothing exists, nevertheless there appear as relative truths various appearances. If you look at these appearances, you will see that in their nature they are the unity of their emptiness and their appearance. So that is the unity of appearance and emptiness. The same thing is true of experiences within the mind, such as meditative states of bliss. If you look at the nature of bliss, you will see that it is empty. And this is the unity of bliss and emptiness. Furthermore, the capacity of the mind to recognize, to know, to be aware, that awareness that is characteristic of the mind, is also unborn. And if you look at it and see its emptiness, that is the unity of awareness and emptiness. And finally, the mind's lucidity is also empty. That is the unity of lucidity and emptiness. Now these four unities, appearance emptiness, bliss emptiness, awareness emptiness, and lucidity emptiness, are the meaning of the unborn nature. So the instruction here is to rest in just this. As it says in the text, abide continually within the mind itself and practice only deep meditation. And how do you do this? You do it without thought. free of mental activity. That means free of any dualistic differentiation between that which is meditating or observing and that which is meditated upon or observed. When one realizes the unborn nature, emptiness, then the cause of suffering, mental afflictions, and their result, suffering itself, cease. As a result, one becomes free of misery, fear, sadness, regret, and anxiety. These are all eradicated, leaving one fearless. Therefore, the samadhi of the realization of the unborn was called by the Buddha in the sutras the heroic samadhi, because with the achievement of it, one is no longer afraid of anything. Next comes verse 33, which explains the fourth symbol, the dharmata beyond the intellect. And this is something that transcends even the unborn, the realization of the unborn described in the previous verse. Therefore, it is the Vajra-like samadhi, the ultimate samadhi. This is what ensues when one has gone through the stages of, for example, thoughts that arise in the mind being apprehended by recollection, then recollection dissolving into the expanse beyond recollection. That within that expanse, there occurring the realization of the unborn, and then finally the transcendence of even that. In the stanza, when it says intellect, mind, and mental appearances have this very nature, it means that this nature beyond the intellect is beyond intellect, beyond mind, beyond mental appearances, and yet is the nature of them all. Therefore, when it says in the third line, all the varieties of the seen and the seer have this very nature, it is beyond the dualism of seer and seen. Nevertheless, all such things have this nature as well. And that is what is called the nature beyond the intellect. In the fourth line, when it says bodhicitta also has this very nature, bodhicitta, of course, has two aspects, relative bodhicitta and absolute bodhicitta. Relative bodhicitta is in general the wish to protect and alleviate the suffering of all beings. In essence, it is compassion that has an aspect of discernment. Here, what is meant is absolute bodhicitta, which is that mind, or citta, which recognizes the nature of all things. Now, this too has an aspect of compassion, because the realization of the nature of all things spontaneously produces an extraordinary or special compassion that regards all beings with compassion through the understanding of the nature. And this compassion is very, very powerful because it is unfabricated. So that is the fourth of the four symbols presented in Saraha's Dohas beyond the intellect. The next question that needs to be answered about the path is, how do we start to practice these four symbols? The next verse, therefore, is an explanation of how we start to do so by the gradual cultivation of hearing, reflection, and meditation. In the beginning, we have to start with hearing, and on the basis of hearing, we can cultivate or practice reflection, and on that basis, finally, meditation. Now, why do we need hearing? We need to hear because although we all possess Sugatha Garbha, or Buddha nature, we are unaware of it. We don't know it's there. We have to be told. Therefore, an analogy for this is presented in the Uttara Tantra Shastra, in which it says that Sugatha Garbha is like buried gold. Imagine if a large chunk or piece of gold somehow became buried underground, covered with dirt and dust and garbage and filth of all kinds. The gold itself would not change at all, even though 100 or 1,000 years passed. But nevertheless, no one would take advantage of it or use it because it was obscured or hidden. Eventually, a poor person comes along and builds his shack directly over where the gold is buried. Now, the gold could alleviate his poverty, but since he does not know it's there in the first place, he makes no use of it and suffers. A person with extrasensory perception or supercognition comes along, observes the situation, and kindly and compassionately tells the poor person, you know, there's a very large piece of gold directly under your shack. Why don't you remove it? It will fulfill all your needs. The person hearing this does so and is freed from the suffering of poverty. The function of hearing is very much like that. Therefore, it says in the first line of the 34th verse, a lamp is lit in the darkness of ignorance. This lamp is what you hear. It is the teaching that constitutes the information that the gold is there, that Buddha nature exists. Therefore, that is the beginning of the process of the removal of ignorance. Understanding what you have heard is the achievement of the discernment of hearing. And then, having achieved what is called genuine hearing, you then move on to practice what is called genuine reflection. And that is the proper discrimination, using the mind or the intellect, of what has been heard. But then you do not leave it just with having conceptual understanding through reflection, but you actually meditate upon it. And through that meditation, as the text says, you discard the mind's flaws. That process of hearing, reflection, and meditation is how we can realize the meaning of the four symbols. The 34th verse is an explanation of the entire process of hearing, reflection, and meditation in summary. Since among these three steps, the most important is the practice of meditation, our text now continues to expand upon this and explain this in more detail. And this is done in verse 35 and verse 36. Verse 35 is about how, other than the recognition of the mind's nature, there is no need for any getting rid of anything from it, or any act of negation, nor is there any need for any kind of creation or construction, or any kind of logical establishment of anything. This same idea is explained in other places when it says, first of all, in this there is nothing that needs to be removed. The statement that there is nothing that needs to be removed means that when you look at your mind's nature, you are not attempting to extract something from it. There is no solid thing within it that needs to be taken out. And that is referred to in our text as, there is no negating. The previous quotation continues, and there is not the slightest thing that needs to be added or introduced. Also, when you are meditating, you are not attempting to alter or add to or improve the mind's nature. So therefore, as our text says, there is no constructing. Because the nature itself is beyond the intellect and cannot therefore be conceptually apprehended, there is no apprehending, because this nature is inconceivable. Now those who seek for something to be negated, something to be constructed, something to be apprehended, something of which they can conceive, are here referred to as the ignorant, because they are bound by these classifications of mind. But what we are discovering in meditation is not something that is conceivable in such a way. It is the inseparable, the co-emergent. And it is utterly pure in being beyond all such concepts and conceptualizations. So meditation should be in that way free of intellectualization. Verse 35 is about the manner of meditation in general. Next, verse 36 is about how through meditation we realize the ultimate nature. Now, the ultimate nature is realized through meditation, but it is not realized through logical analysis. The meditation through which one realizes it is the meditation of direct experience or direct observation. Therefore, it says in the Ocean of Songs of the Kagyu Fathers, the nature that is established in texts through terminology is not the nature, or establishing the nature in that way cannot bring true realization of it. Because anytime you generate a conceptual apprehension of the nature of things, by the very nature of conceptuality, it must be dualistic. For example, when we contemplate the two truths, we think of relative truth as appearance and as one thing, and absolute truth as emptiness and as a different thing. We think of them as different from one another, which is, by its nature, dualistic. So therefore, it says in the first line of our verse, examining emptiness with the reasoning of one or many, it is not one, nor is it many. In other words, when the nature of emptiness is truly seen, it transcends any kind of dualism. The quotation from the Ocean of Songs of the Kagyu continues, but the suchness or nature established by practical instruction is directly manifest. Directly manifest here means that when this nature is directly recognized through meditation, it is like something being pointed out, like something like putting one's finger right on something. And just seeing that, as our text says, through mere recognition, living beings are utterly freed. Having identified or recognized this nature, it remains to cultivate this recognition in meditation. And meditation consists of fostering the continuity of the initial recognition. This is described in the third line of our verse, where it says, meditate recognizing what is clear and unmoving. Now this means that the nature of mind that you are meditating on is itself completely free of any unclarity or any instability. But at the same time, one can still suffer from the defects of meditation, which are torpor and excitement. So the instruction to meditate recognizing what is clear also means to meditate on the nature with a mind that is clear, that is free of torpor. When the mind is unclear or torpid, one needs to promote the mind's lucidity. It also means to meditate on this nature with a mind that is free of instability. When the mind is clear but unstable, one needs to calm down and reduce the instability or movement of the mind. By doing so, by meditating on the nature in this way, it says in the verse, I apprehend the stable mind to be just that. By meditating with a mind that is free of the defects of torpor and wildness or excitement, one will apprehend the nature just as it is, as Saraha here says he has, which means one will apprehend the nature of the mind, which in itself is free of those defects and is therefore clear and free of movement. That completes the presentation of Path Mahamudra. There remain 3 stanzas or verses as presentation of Fruition Mahamudra, and the final verse, which is the conclusion of the text. I'll go through those tomorrow afternoon. And for the rest of the session, I'm going to go on with the Tranquility meditation instruction, which I began several days ago for the use of new practitioners. You'll remember that Tranquility has 3 stages: grasping the mind when it has not been grasped, stabilizing it once it has been grasped, and bringing enhancement upon stabilization. We are still within the presentation of the second, stabilizing the mind once it has been grasped. You will remember that this consisted primarily of the 9 methods of resting the mind. From among these, we have gone through the first 5. The 5th was taming. And now I'll talk about the last 4. The practice of taming, the 5th method of resting the mind, as you will remember, consists of the recollection of the qualities of samadhi. And doing this will promote enthusiasm, which can sometimes help you to bring your mind to rest. But if you apply this as a remedy too often, it can have the side effect of causing more thoughts and causing more attachment. So therefore, when the 5th one does not work, you apply the 6th, which is called pacification. Pacification is the opposite of the 5th, although it is done for a similar reason. Pacification is not the generation of enthusiasm for samadhi by the recollection of its qualities. It is the recollection of the defect and uselessness of thoughts. It is the recollection of the fact that we have had a beginningless series of thoughts which has done us absolutely no good. Thoughts are useless. If you recognize that thinking is useless, you will have no trouble letting go of thought. You have trouble letting go of a thought when you attach value to it, when you think that there is something special about that thought, something important about it that makes it an exception. So if you can get rid of that idea, you will have no trouble letting go of the thought. Now, if you find yourself thinking about something that at some point you really do have to think about, then during the meditation session, simply postpone it. Say to yourself, I will think about that later. There's no point in thinking about it now. That's not what I'm here for. So the recollection of the uselessness of thought is the 6th method of resting the mind, pacification. The 7th method of resting the mind is called close pacification. And this is to be applied when neither taming nor pacification works. The previous 2 methods, in the case of the first, were recollection of the qualities of samadhi, and in the case of the second, the uselessness of thoughts. But there are times where you try both of those and you still can't achieve a stable state of tranquility. In that case, when you apply the 7th, rather than attempting to let go of the thought without examining its quality, you actually apprehend the thought and see what type of thought it is. When you notice that a thought has arisen while you are meditating, you look to see what type of thought it is, whether it is a thought of attachment, of aversion, of guilt or regret, and so on. Somehow, it seems that when you recognize the thought's content or type, this makes it easier to let go of. Doing so is the 7th method, close pacification. Of these 9, the first 7 are the actual methods which you apply in order to achieve a stable state of tranquility. And the 8th and 9th are more results of the proper application of the first 7. The 8th method of resting the mind is called unification. And it refers to a state where, through the practice of meditation, thoughts have subsided to the point where you can relax and maintain a stable state of tranquility without much effort. The 9th and last one is called even placement. And this is when the mind rests free of any kind of distraction, evenly and effortlessly. The 9 methods of resting the mind are the main technique in the second stage of tranquility instruction, stabilizing the mind once it has been grasped. The third stage of tranquility practice is enhancing the achieved stability of mind. This is mainly done in post-meditation, and it consists of remaining in a state of undistracted awareness of what appears before your senses. For example, what forms appear to your eye, what sounds appear to your ears, what smells appear to your nose, tastes to your tongue, and tactile sensations to your body. The key here is to be undistracted, which means not to lose a conscious awareness of your experience. Next, and that completes the tranquility instruction, some of you have asked me to say something about His Holiness, the Jawang Karmapa. So I'm going to say something about him based upon my own experience during the time that I've spent with him in the last few years. The 16th Jawang Karmapa, as part of his activity for the benefit of beings and the teachings, displayed a great interest in and love for birds. And to the extent that whether this was a result of his blessing or for other reasons, it's said that many of his birds displayed the indications of resting in meditation at the time of their deaths. Now, in contrast to that, His Holiness the 17th Karmapa, if one can speak of his having hobbies, does not have birds as a hobby. His hobby is books. He is extraordinarily concerned with and devoted to the acquisition and study of rare books of our tradition, such as the writings of the previous masters of the Kagyu tradition that are hard to find, and so on. He goes to great effort to acquire these. He doesn't seem to care about the difficulty of doing so or the cost. He will buy them if they have to be bought. He will copy them if they can't be bought. He'll get them from Tibet. He'll get them from India. He's extraordinarily devoted to this. Now, if you consider this, most 17-year-olds are not that interested in books. Especially, they're not likely to be interested in dusty old books of spiritual instruction. My opinion is that the cause of this is the following. When the 16th Jawang Karmapa went from Tibet to India, he obviously did so in a hurry. Because of his sudden move to India, he was not able to bring a vast number of necessary texts with him. When he subsequently spread the teachings in India, established retreat facilities and colleges, he had to work very, very hard to acquire the necessary texts, and sometimes was unable to do so. And he displayed great concern about this at the time. I believe that His Holiness the 17th Karmapa's extraordinary concern with the acquisition of the older books of our tradition is the emergence of the habit of his previous life. Most 17-year-olds would only display a similar interest in things like music, dancing, and entertainment, and not books of spiritual instruction, which are, for the most part, so old that they're not even particularly nice to look at from the outside. Some of them are in pretty poor shape. So I think this is evidence of the emergence of his previous habits. If I tell you a story of an experience that I consider somewhat amazing, I would preface it by saying that I'm something of a skeptic. I'm not particularly interested in looking for miracles or signs of supercognition or extrasensory perception. Nevertheless, something happened to me with His Holiness that was very surprising. This May, before I left to come to the West, I acquired or gained the temporary use of a copy of the collected works of the fourth Shamar Rinpoche, Chuchi Drakpa. And knowing that His Holiness was anxious to procure this, I copied it. Now, this was a very old 6-volume set of Tibetan books, which means there was no contiguous pagination. In other words, the volumes didn't have proper numbers. Which meant that after we'd made the copies, we discovered that both the original and the copy were completely out of order. And since there were no page numbers, we had a very hard time putting it, collating it and putting it in order. Now, when I say we, I mean me plus my 2 monks, Losang Dorje and Karma Punso. You have to understand that 6 volumes here doesn't mean 6 books. Each volume could contain essays of varying length, some of them 2 folios, 3 folios, 4 folios, or up to 60 folios. They were so mixed up that from early morning until late night, for several days, we tried to collate them. We were basically unable to do so, but finally at the very end, we had put everything in order, and there was 1 page missing. One of the essays was called The Defects of Family Life. And it's of 3 folios. The middle folio, the second, could not be found. Around this time, His Holiness summoned me. And when I went to see him, he asked, how are the copies coming? And I said, well, there's 1 page missing. We can't find the middle folio of The Defects of Family Life. And he looked at the volume which I was carrying, and he said, it's right here. And he pulled it right out. Now, it's truly amazing that what we couldn't find in several days, he was just able to pull out. You couldn't just do that. It must have been some form of supercognition. The Karmapa has thousands of such qualities. And then, next topic. I don't edit this on that. Next today, we're going to visit the stupa, which was created here at the command of His Holiness the 16th Karmapa. And I think that among stupas, this one is extraordinary. For example, His Eminence Jomgon Rinpoche, when directing the project, insisted that no less than 100,000 tsatsas be prepared for the inside of the stupa. And the way these were done and the way the stupa was constructed was according to what we regard as the most original and best tradition of preparation. In the very early beginnings of the propagation of Buddha Dharma in Tibet, when the monastery of Samye was constructed, 4 stupas, which are considered to be more or less the earliest stupas in Tibet, were built. And they're called the white stupa, the red stupa, the black stupa, and the green stupa. The instructions for their preparation and consecration and so forth were written down by the director of their creation, who was the great abbot Shantirakshita. It was his instructions that were used by Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche and the other lamas involved and the many devoted disciples, all of whom worked very, very hard to create and complete the creation of this stupa. I'm not very learned in geography. Well, he's more learned than I am, I'll tell you that. But this stupa is in amidst the mountains of the continental divide. And all the rivers west of this flow to the west, and all the rivers east of this flow to the east? Oh, I never knew that. So because it is in that way, because it is in that way in the very middle of this country, I think it is of great benefit to the United States in general. and obviously particularly to people who practice in this area. So we're going to visit the stupa this afternoon, and I invite all of you to come and regard it with devotion. And now we'll recite the dedication and aspiration.